Welcome to the GenTwenty podcast. I'm Nicole.
And I'm Marina.
And today we're talking about leaving your comfort zone and the growth that happens when you get uncomfortable. So a lot of us spend a lot of time in this place we call our comfort zone, and that's where I like to think of it as we're not nervous to do anything. What do you think, Marina?
That is exactly right, because we're comfortable. We've put like a perimeter where we feel really safe and we live within it. And it's kind of, without saying comfort zone, it's your comfort zone.
Yeah, if you think about it as a physical place, it's almost as if we've put like a fence around us that we live within. And yeah, we might have everything we need within this fence, but chances are we probably don't. And if we want to see more of the world and to grow into the people that we want to be, we often have to go past the fence.
We got to leave the fence. Yeah. And getting uncomfortable is how you grow, right? But also doing things, like trying these new things that might make you uncomfortable. It's how you learn more about yourself. It's how you get to know yourself better. And I think it's really important.
Yeah, and how you become more confident and more independent. And really, I think you just come kind of to power within yourself when you are expanding to fit. Because, okay, if you think about it again with our fence, and we can't get outside of the fence when we're in the fence. But in order to expand and grow, like if you think about it, growth is uncomfortable.
That's why they call it growing pains, right?
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. So like when you're younger, I used to get growing pains all the time when you were like getting taller and your body is like physically growing. But the same thing is kind of happening with us emotionally and mentally.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important to try things that we're scared to do and things we've never done before to help encourage that growth.
Yeah. And even trying things that we are pretty sure we won't like. That's really important. When I was in high school, I was so shy, so introverted, and just did not like to leave my physical comfort zone. I didn't want to go anywhere. And my brother had done a foreign exchange where he went to Spain for 2 weeks and lived with a family. And then the family's daughter came to our house and lived with us for 2 weeks later in the year. And it was so beneficial to him that my parents, I wouldn't say made me sign up for it, but like it wasn't not an option. And I remember being so terrified to the point where I was like nauseous on the plane, freaking out. And I was with a school group, like I was with teachers and my classmates who were participating. And then after I got there and started walking around and experiencing this new city, something inside of me just opened and I was never the same in the best way possible. But I did not want to go. I was really afraid and I was pretty sure I wouldn't like it. I was like, this is dumb. I'm going to hate this. Thank God I was wrong about that.
I think it's so important that we are forced to go through those kinds of transitions. I mean, forced kind of sounds bad, but I mean, like you said, your parents didn't really leave no as an option. I think a lot of times getting out of our comfort zone, it's either a choice that we're consciously making or it's something that we're sort of forced into in a way. Like for me, I moved across the country right after I graduated from college, and I was actually really excited about it. I mean, there's a lot of scary things, but I kind of saw it as like a new adventure. And I mean, that's not something I'd ever done before, and I had to figure out on my own. And after we moved across the country, I had a lot of anxiety actually about leaving my house by myself. I don't really know what it was or what it stemmed from, and like never really delved into that, but I physically did not leave my house by myself for 3 years. I did leave my house, but only with other people. So I wasn't just inside, so we don't have to worry about that. But I started to realize it was in 2015 where I could not live like that. And being in my house was, I mean, it was comfortable and it was safe. And I mean, I don't really know what I was afraid of, but it was the place where I felt the safest. But I also knew that I was never going to grow or learn to meet people or do anything if I was constantly relying on other people to get me to do something as simple as leave my house. And it just sounds so weird that it's like I didn't leave my house for 3 years.
I, in a similar boat, was terrified to drive for a really long time. And when I moved from the East Coast back to California and was commuting to grad school, I wouldn't drive. I would take the train and I would make my mom drop me off at the train. And I would be panicked the whole time because I was so afraid. And I just really wanted to go to grad school and just made myself do it and had to like get over that fear. And then once I got comfortable with that, with the train ride, I started driving once every other time. And it was really hard and really scary. And I cried, and I now love driving. And I'm just like, oh yeah, road trip. Sure. Let me drive. Like, let me pop in my car. And I'm so grateful because my life was getting really small and really suffocating from living in that fear. Like my comfort zone got so small. So yeah, I think our comfort zones can be really limiting to a certain point. If you get to a point like I did where I let my fear of leaving my comfort zone get so strong that my zone got even smaller. And like, you don't want to live your life like that. You can't.
Yeah. I think along the lines with travel for you, how you were talking about going back and forth. For me, like moving to this side of the country meant that, you know, most of my family and friends were on the other side of the country. And I had never traveled alone before. And just the fact of like me not leaving my house was a huge hurdle. But I realized that like I did want to travel. And I mean, I was going to have to get over that somehow. So I took very, very small steps to learning how to do that. The first time we went back to the East Coast, I live on the West Coast now, my husband and I traveled together, and that helped me feel really comfortable getting to know the travel situation, you know, checking in at the airport, where to pick up the rental car. Those things are very stressful. I think that just after that, like slowly, like, so we used to have to take flights that had layovers until they had nonstop flights in between the cities we fly in between. And so as soon as that happened, I felt way more comfortable not having a layover to take just a direct flight for like my first few flights back and forth. And so that was slow to build up. And I felt more comfortable sitting in an aisle seat than in a middle seat or a window seat. So I did that. And those are things that helped me slowly grow and expand my comfort zone, but in a way that wasn't like so shocking and overwhelming that I just wanted to turn and run back into the middle of the circle, you know?
Yeah, totally. And, you know, after that high school trip that changed everything, I was really happy traveling. I was a really confident flyer, and I grew up on the East Coast as well. And my mom relocated to California when I was in college for her job. And so I started flying by myself to go back to see her and was happy as a clam. And then something happened where I started getting really afraid to travel and to get into a car and to fly. It felt like my life had been taken away from me, and my comfort zone was like all that I had left to hold on to. And so I got to a point where I thought I wouldn't be able to move out of my apartment or live in any other city because I thought that I would never be able to start new. It was just too scary, too much risk. And I realized that made me sadder than the thought of having a panic attack on an airplane did. And so I was just like, okay, this is going to be really painful and uncomfortable, but I did it. And
we got to do it.
Yeah. And it started with just taking little trips. And when I started, like, again, essentially relearning how to drive after not driving for 5 years, I was driving in my town in California, and I wouldn't drive on the highway. I would just drive on back roads. And once I got comfortable with that, I started getting on the highway. And then after that, I started taking longer and longer trips. And it's amazing when I think about where I am now versus where I was even 2 years ago. And I think with trying new things and making yourself leave your level of comfort, you learn so much about yourself, but you don't always learn it right away. And then all of a sudden time has passed and you think back and it's like, wow, I can't believe there was a time I didn't leave my apartment, you know?
Right. I think leaving your comfort zone doesn't have to be this huge jump. Like, you don't have to jump out of what feels safe to you. It can be a small expansion and like very small acts. And then like you're widening your circle slowly and slowly over time until all of a sudden you realize that you don't even recognize the person whose comfort zone used to be so tiny. And along with like leaving my house and like not feeling comfortable with that, something that really changed for me is once I had a baby, I was like, get me out of my house.
Right.
It was so interesting. I mean, I love being home. I love my house and stuff, but I also like going out and doing things and seeing people whose lives don't revolve around an infant's feeding schedule. It's so strange how things just change and expand over time. And I think it's really important to take those small acts towards things that scare you. And for you, it might be travel, it might be driving, it might be public speaking, it might be applying for jobs that are not in your city, it might be applying for things you don't think you're qualified for. But I think that it's really important that to grow as people, we get comfortable with things that are uncomfortable. And you don't have to live in discomfort constantly. That's not what it means.
Mm-mm.
But it means that basically approaching things that feel uncomfortable to you with open arms and realizing that through that discomfort, you're going to experience growth.
Yeah. And I think like a perfect example would be in my early 20s, I hated going to restaurants by myself, hated it. And then I was working at a job where I had an alternative schedule every 9 weeks. I would have a later shift. So I had the mornings off and none of my friends had that schedule. So I was by myself and living in New York City. And I started taking myself out to breakfast and realized how much I loved eating alone at a restaurant because I took my book, I took a journal, I would just people watch, I would have a nice long leisurely breakfast. And if I hadn't done that, I would have just stayed in my apartment until it was time to go to work at noon and then gone to work and come home and gone to bed. And that would have been pretty small and sad. But I didn't. I was just like, well, if I can't go to breakfast with someone, I'll just go to breakfast with myself. And I got more comfortable sitting by myself and feeling like, okay, yeah, maybe I look weird because I'm by myself, but I don't care. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. Like, who really cares? No one. Most people are thinking far more about themselves than they're thinking about you.
Yeah.
I think that's important to remember.
Have you ever gone to the movies by yourself?
No, I have not. It's just not something that's ever, like worked out for me.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's one thing I don't know if I would do. I feel like I see movies as like a group activity, kind of like getting your nails done. Like I never go by myself to get my nails done.
Oh, I don't either. It's interesting because there are things. So as an introverted person, I genuinely enjoy being by myself. But there are things in life that I don't do by myself because I think I would enjoy them more with friends.
Mm-hmm.
So it is interesting to try them. Like I love museums, right? And maybe that's really nerdy, but I love going to museums with friends. I have so much fun. And then when I was having weird scheduling, I started going to museums by myself. And I will say it's not as fun as with going with a friend, but I do really enjoy it. And I learned through that process that you like really can't wait for anyone else. You should just do what you want to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an important lesson for me to learn at the time. But
yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I'm thinking about like when I was in college. And did you ever pick classes because your friends would be in them?
No, but that's because I was a French major and none of my friends were ever going to be in my classes.
That's funny. Yeah. I'm trying to think of like how many classes I actually took because I was really interested in them versus because I knew someone who was going to be in it. And I feel like that I might not have taken a lot of classes just because I wanted to take them. There's probably like a handful of them.
And I wonder how things would be different if you had just taken the classes you wanted to or like not worried about.
Yeah, it's just another way of like living within my comfort zone where my comfort zone was people that I knew and were familiar to me.
I had a friend in college who wouldn't go anywhere by herself. And that was always very foreign to me because our campus was really small. And she used to get mad if we didn't want to go to the dining hall with her. And that just made me sad to think about like not ever being able to go somewhere on your own. And I think in like dealing with that, it helped me remind myself, like, I need to make sure I'm always somewhat independent so that I don't get to a point where I can't go to the gym if I don't have a buddy, because we can't wait for people.
Yeah, I mean, we can't. And I feel like that's a really interesting thing because in college, I feel like my school was huge. So there was people everywhere all the time. And I feel like because a lot of my schedules aligned with other people's, although most of my friends were not in my major. So that's to kind of tell you about the classes that I ended up taking. They weren't always really well aligned.
I'm just picturing you taking like woodworking or fishing.
Well, I was a psychology major. My school actually offered a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology, whereas most schools offer a Bachelor of Science. And they do offer a Bachelor of Science track, but that means you have to take a bunch of biology classes. So a lot of my friends were biology majors. So I took a lot of classes in biology.
Okay.
So it's kind of weird, I guess. But another class is audited the word where you don't get a grade for it? I don't know.
Yeah, you just like sit in.
Yeah, I needed like extra credits, and my friend was like, oh, I have to take government. And I was like, girl, I will take that with you, because what did I care?
Oh my gosh.
I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
That's so weird. But yeah, I mean, I guess I could have used that, something I was paying a MIT for, to further my own interests instead of being like...
Yeah, you could have taken woodworking.
Yeah. That class actually did push me in some ways because like we had a discussion section. So what I would do is on my way to class, I would pick up the school newspaper and read about what was going on and then bring up something in discussion. And they just thought I was super well informed.
That's impressive.
So just so you know, I got a solid P for pass in that class.
Pro tips here.
Because I wasn't graded.
Pick up your school newspaper, folks. Read it.
I know.
But you know, that's true. If you hadn't tried that class that you wouldn't have normally signed up for based on your major, you might not have learned to have such open discussions, because maybe the class wasn't in your major, but class discussions are really important and really valuable to be able to participate. And when I went to my small school, we had a participation grade where like you had to go to so many classes, but also it was built into the grade that you had to talk, or however each professor rated it differently. But I remember I was a senior and I was in a social, like Soc 101, whatever that is. My whole class was like freshmen and sophomores, and they were so timid. And the professor would get so frustrated because we'd be trying to have class discussion, and like me and one other precocious person would talk. And I got a lot out of that class because I kept getting to ask my questions since no one else was talking. I think it was a class that fulfilled a requirement, but I was also just kind of interested in and just went for it. I remember the class was really hard. The teacher had a different grading curve than everybody else I'd ever taken a class with, but I learned a lot. I got more comfortable in public speaking because just like 20 stone-faced freshmen stared back at me when I would ask questions or offer answers. So I got a little bit more comfortable, and that was kind of a bonus because public speaking has not always been my strength.
Yeah, and it's just interesting how there's so many opportunities to really lean into things that make you uncomfortable. And it's really about showing up for them and allowing them to make an impression on you.
Yeah, keep an open mind and think about, even if you're not super excited to do something, if you say yes to it, you might get a lot more out of it than you ever imagined.
I think that in the next week, it's really important that we all try to identify our comfort zones and what that actually means to us individually. And I know if you're listening to this when it comes out, it's still in the time of Corona, so the world's a little different right now, but I mean, maybe that gives us an opportunity to expand our comfort zones in new ways. I know that I'm taking advantage of some different opportunities, and even starting this podcast. Marina and I have been talking about doing this for over a year now, because I bought this microphone in the spring of 2019 and it just, didn't really align. And then we kind of figured, well, the heck with it. We should just do it.
Yeah. And if you want to talk about getting out of your comfort zone, we've mentioned TikTok a couple of times. And if you are a younger millennial, you will be very familiar. But I joined TikTok and Nicole joined TikTok, and we very much enjoy watching the videos. And one day I was moving out of my apartment. I had just lost my job. All these things were happening, all these changes. And I was just like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to make a TikTok. And it was so hard. I literally felt 100 years old trying to figure out how to edit it. And I just bit the bullet and posted it. And it got, I think, seen by 20 people. And I sent it to a couple of friends. And you know what? I'm not going to lie to you. It was really awkward. I have no rhythm. But I was really proud of myself. And I realized that I have been taking myself way too seriously. And shortly after that, Nicole and I started our podcast. And now I'm just like, here I am. Let's go.
Yeah, here we are. Let's do it. Let's show up. We'll figure it out. It might be hard. It might be awkward sometimes. It doesn't matter. We'll get past it. We'll grow. We'll learn. And that's how we feel about it.
The end. Well, this has been another episode of the GenTwenty podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.